My name is David, and we're going to be talking to Samantha about this liquor store Proof in Somerville in Winter Hill and how this came about. A friend of mine and I found this piece of property that was available. It's a two-story building with, at the time it had some offices upstairs and an old kind of basically dirty kind of typical kind of packy store on the first floor. So we came in, we ended up buying the property, and when we came to talk about the lease for the liquor store, the owners were basically said, forget it, we have 8 more years on the lease, we're not going to negotiate with you, we're staying here as is, sorry, goodbye. So me and my partner on the project walked out the door. We sat in the car and talked for a few minutes, and Rob said, hey, I'm going to just buy a 6-pack on the way home anyways, I'm going to go back in. He came back in, and he called me on my way home 50 minutes later and basically said, hey, the guy broke down. He basically said they want to sell the store. So we basically sat down and we really talked about it, and I started getting excited about the store. And I started saying, this part of Somerville really deserves a nice store. I didn't want some other person to come in and leave it really like the same as it was before. I felt like it needed a total revamp, and I didn't have the faith that someone was going to do that. So we decided we were going to take this leap of faith. Neither of us have any really experience in the retail, especially alcohol business, but we decided we were going to do it. So in order to do that, though, we needed to make sure we had somebody who had experience. So we reached out to some people and brought in our manager, Jay, who's been in the business for 30 years. He had a store in Chelmsford, and once we had him to solidify this deal, we decided this is a no-brainer. We're going to do this. We have the support and the knowledge of someone who's been in the business, and we had a vision of what we wanted to do. We brought in an architect and designer who worked together, and we sat down with them and we started pulling out photos of different places that we liked, different stores that we were visiting, and what we liked, different aspects of different stores. And they sat back, they listened, they went back to their studios, and they came up with this overall vision of what they thought this area of Somerville would work and the look that they thought we were going for. So as you'll see in the video and in the pictures is we brought in all this kind of bamboo and fossilized wood to give more of a unique kind of look. So you'll see in the photos. So yeah, that's where the concept came. And then from there it came into how do we market, how do we show that name, how do we give it a name that fits what we were going for. So then we sat down and started branding it and started coming up with, all right, what is this store? What does it feel like to you? What kind of name? So we then discussed it with branding and started coming up with how we got the name Proof. So we had a list of all different ideas of names. Proof just stuck, we all loved it. And so once we had Proof as the name, we sent the name out to a graphic designer who then came up with the logo and kind of color schemes and looks of certain stuff that we would kind of put on our website and use colors and all that from now on, print, fonts, all that. So that's kind of where Proof started. It was a full gut rehab, so we took a building that was built in the 70s, completely gutted it, and this is what you have now, which is Proof, which came out and opened in December of 2018, and we're only right now about 5 months in. Between buying it and opening, it was close to about 1.5 years by the time we opened the store. When we inherited the store, and a lot of times when you buy a store, I don't know about other retail stores, but liquor store, is you negotiate the products already in the store. So we had to sit down with the owners. They gave us a list of what they had in the store at the time and pricing. Then you try to negotiate, but basically you buy their product, regardless if you're going to use it or not. So because our store was really wanting to cater to a different clientele and different formats of wine and a better liquor selection and a better craft beer selection, is basically we bought their inventory and boxed probably 90% of it up and put it into storage in our basement, and we'll use that for specials, or some of it might get sold off because it wasn't the impression and the experience that we wanted to give off with Proof, the new type of store that we were opening. They were selling a lot of big marketed brands, so Barefoot, the Cabots, the the J-Lors, the Josh. So a lot of the bigger name stuff that you see commercialized, it just wasn't what we wanted to do. We wanted to take wines that people may have not heard of, which were just as good or better than that stuff, mass marketed, and stay with smaller vineyards that were producing amazing wines, and local breweries that were putting out great beers. And we wanted to focus on that and get away from the bigger kind of name stuff and make it more esoteric, which we think is what the experience of what people want. And they love coming in and trying new stuff. So then we took out the, again, a lot of the typical old marketed stuff and brought in more smaller batch bourbons and whiskeys and scotches, some nice local vodkas and gins and things like that. So you'll see around the store that you're gonna find a lot more local beers and liquors, and then on the wine side of it, you're going to see a lot more esoteric, kind of smaller vineyard, nicer stuff, all in the same price range. It's not as super expensive. You can get it anywhere from $8 to bottles upwards of $100 and something, but we fit every kind of price range in our selection. How does a liquor store kind of sell, and what's their most selling kind of products really vary on kind of time of year. So when you think of winter, you think of people more like putting on sweaters and jackets, and they want something a little more heavy. So they're going with, more heavier reds, so Cabernets and maybe some Zinfandels. They're thinking of more of the scotches and the whiskeys and the bourbons. The darker, we call it the brown side of the liquor industry, because it's more of those darker wines, the rums maybe even, that it more exudes more of a warmer kind of feeling. So those tend to be more winter drinks, although this part of the city and what's going on now is the craft beer world is just booming. So you know that there are so many different breweries now popping up everywhere from New England to Maine to Vermont and far beyond. And so people love the craft beer world. So we have 15 coolers of basically all these different craft beers that we rotate all the time. So I would say for us, our biggest seller is the craft beer and then the wines. And the wines will change from reds over to kind of whites and rosés in the nicer weather. Will be our bigger stuff. And the liquor stuff tends to be in most liquor stores is probably the least picked over stuff, because when you buy a bottle of whiskey or you buy a bottle of vodka, you don't go through it as quick. When you open a bottle of wine, it's usually gone in that meal. The other stuff, the liquor will sit on the shelf, so that might sit a little bit longer in your house. So I would say craft beer, wine is our two biggest sellers, and then the liquor side of it is our third biggest seller. So the back end of the business is pricing and placement of product. So basically, easy on the wine stuff is where obviously you want to do it either by category or variety. And because in the United States, people associate it with a lot of the grape and region. So we do both. So we do grape, done it by grape, but we also do it by region. So you'll see French, Italian, South American, but then you'll also have racks of Rosé, Chardonnay, Pinots, just because the mentality and the mind thought process, at least in the United States, is kind of geared that way. So we do that to make it easier for the client. As far as placement of product, and this is based off of a couple things. There's how you price the different products. Is beer typically, wine and liquor all have more or less a different kind of markup. And even within those categories, they're different price range. So domestic beers might be closer to 20-something% markup. Craft beers sometimes go up to 32, 33%. In the wine tends to be the highest. There's typically maybe like a 50% more or less on the markup on that. Maybe for certain allocated beer and wine, it might even be a little higher. On the liquor side of it, it usually maintains around 22-23% more or less on the markup side of it. And that's pretty common in the industry. You play around with it. Bigger wine shops like a Total Wine, the Cappies, because they're buying so much in bulk, their rate may be different. Because they're buying so much, they're gonna get a better rate typically on the product so they can bring their price down. Or what they will do is they'll have a really popular product that most people are looking for at a really low price, maybe like a Tito's. They'll sell it for below even maybe value or right at the price range just to get you in the store. And then they assume that you're gonna then buy that plus some other stuff, which is where they mark up maybe even more. So you'll see in our store, whereas the craft beer side is on the first basically 12 cooler sides, and then some of the domestic stuff you'll see down at the end. For that reason is, one is this is what the most customers want is the craft, but two is that's where more of the money is. So you want to sell more of that than you do on the domestic stuff. As far as the liquor and the wine, it doesn't really matter placement per se. You do want to bring people into the store, so maybe you might want people to flow differently, so you might do certain products that are moving to push them to actually walk through the store. It's just harder to do that because it's not as easy to move wine around as it is to do beer, because stuff is already set in shelves. So that's basically kind of the back end of how things are placed and the pricing side of it. If a new product comes out and we want people to know about it, we will talk with the distributor who then talks to their sales team about a tasting. So we'll have tastings. It could be once or twice a week. And we might focus on beer one time, we might focus on wine another, we might focus on a liquor one time, or we might mix them and have a beer and a wine tasting and set it up at different places of the store. So how do we decide who we want? Typically it will be based off of something new that's out. Or if a distributor just says, you know what, we really want to push this product in your area, we want people to be aware of it, we'll then schedule them in our calendar for tastings. And we balance it out by what we think our clientele will like around here, as well as kind of what's selling well in the store. And so that distributor will then talk to their sales team, who will then send in the taster, and we'll pick out of their portfolio of liquor, wine, or beer and say, hey, let's taste these. So let's specifically say it was a beer brewery. They might have an IPA, they might have a double IPA, they might have a lager, whatever. We might say, hey, let's pour these tonight. Let's keep it to these 3 or 4. And we'll have them come in, they'll pour those, and we'll always have that product in the store to sell. Because a lot of times at tastings, that's how people get familiar with it. They like something, we direct them to the cooler or to the wine rack where we're selling that product, and they could walk out of the store with that product right then. So there's no really true logic always on how you do the tastings other than constantly rotating, trying new things, and making people aware, our customers, of new products that are coming out. How I decided on the concept of the store is I thought about this. I sat down with my partner at some time, way before we started the project. I said, listen, if we're gonna do this, the only way I will be part of this is if we come up with a concept of a store, which is a place that I feel comfortable with, not only just working at, but a place that I would want to go to and buy a product to bring to someone. So when I think of stores, I think of 2 different varieties. I think of the local quick package store where you know what you're getting. You're running in for a 6-pack of Corona or an inexpensive bottle of wine, or you know exactly what kind of liquor you want. You're in, you're out, that's it. There's no experience to it other than you got your product. I didn't want that. I wanted it to be a feeling where you come into the store, you might come in for a beer, but because the store is well designed and a good looking store, you end up walking through the aisles of the wine, and then you end up over at the liquor. So that's the type of store I like to shop at because it's more of an experience. It feels good to buy there. So if I was buying something for somebody for a gift, or I'm going to a dinner, and I wanted something to feel special. It's not just the product I'm buying. I want to have something, I want the experience of me buying it to feel like a good thing for me. I want to go to a store where, one is they have a good variety, two is they know what they're talking about, so they have a good sales team, and three is that it exudes kind of that good selection and feeling of where I feel good about buying something. So if I was going to go to a store like Proof, and I wanted to bring a special gift, I think probably, let's say if I wanted to press someone, I would either bring like a really nice champagne. Again, it doesn't have to be super expensive, 25 plus maybe. They do have them all the way up to, a couple $100s, but I would stay within that range. And that's because champagne's a great, like, all around kind of celebration for a new house, for a baby, for whatever. And it goes with so many stuff. The other thing, maybe if I was going to go with a red, I'd probably come with a bottle of Italian Barolo, which is great. I might do a really nice Cabernet. I probably would tend to go more wine-based champagne or wine because I feel like it's more versatile. And that's just more what I would typically, I like the beer, I like the liquor, but on a regular basis, there's some great feeling, nice feeling about opening a nice bottle of wine and sitting down and having it with friends. So, some of the greatest experience I've had from opening this store, even though it was a huge amount of work to get this concept and thing off the ground, I think what I learned from it is a bunch of things. One is go with your gut on the feeling, the type of store you want. Maybe Proof isn't your type of store, which is okay, but go with what you feel good about. Yes, the demographics and the area and the city and the town have to be part of the decision, but if you make the store what you like, those people will come. So that's the first and foremost. Two is you got to have a good team. It's hard for most people to come up with not just the concept of the store, but the design part of it. So I had an idea of what I wanted, but the important thing is bringing in the right people. So we interviewed different architects and designers and saw some of their work, which I think is super important, whether it's liquor, whether it's retail shop, whether it's food, whatever it is. I think having those other people with that experience in that world is great because color, light, racking systems, shelving, everything like that plays into the overall full experience of the store. So having somebody to help you with that, I'd say, was probably my second most important thing. And third is really feeling out your customer base and knowing what they want. And I think what we're going with here and what we felt worked here is changing things up a lot, listening to the customers when they come and say, oh, you know what, they specifically like a certain wine, or they specifically like a certain beer. Well, we take that seriously, and so we'll go out, we'll go to our distributor, and we'll try to get it. And the fourth and most important is your help, the people that you hire, because they're the ones that really represent who you are. So I think you got to be true to like hiring those people that have the same excitement that you do and are friendly and engaging with the customers. Final is really just sticking to it, because it's really hard, because especially at the beginning of the business where it takes a while to build up that profit enough to feel like it was worth it. You got to stick to your plan. Don't always listen to what other people say. Stick to what you thought. If you really have that desire and that gut feeling of this is it, then you stick with it and you make little tweaks to the business and little tweaks to whatever to kind of fit what maybe you need and what you see changes in it. But overall, you got to have that kind of basic, strong kind of feeling of what you see as your vision, your experience in the store.